I'll talk about layering of structure. Layering consists of three main components. First is meaning, which seems to have an internal structure, so it falls within conceptual structure. Now, there are also layers of parts within that component which can be further broken down. That means there are multiple symbols, each of which corresponds to these parts of meaning. Now, those linguistic symbols are also used within these other two components. Syntactic structure takes care of putting those symbols in the right order, so that sequence is called syntax. Now, syntax governs how small, meaningful symbolic units can be arranged. So meaning can be created by combining several words together. That includes pronouncing words in different ways. Speech sounds are also governed by this process. That indicates a very important interaction between phonological and syntactic structure. Sounds, referred to as phonemes, are another type of unit. These sounds can vary according to rules, which are also studied. All of that falls within this component. While syntactic structure is dictated by rules for putting words in sentences, and the meanings found in phonological and syntactic structures carry over to conceptual structure. Now, the organization of this model is considered standard across all languages, so all languages should have these three types of structures. In fact, they do, but what about sign language? Sign language has also been found to have all three types of structures as well. Now I'll talk about constraints. Now, even if a language is articulated in the visual mode, that doesn't change this part of the model. That means how the mind processes language is universal and how we perceive the world is the same, so the constraints aren't conceptual. While word order can differ according to particular languages. Even home signs have their own basic syntactic structures that are also found in other languages. So is it syntax? Some argue that space may influence syntactic structure, so that's a possibility. While the area in which signed and spoken languages are radically different is in phonological structure, because we don't use sound. Instead, we use manual components along with other articulators like our arms, face, and upper body, which fall within phonological structure. They exist in conjunction with other layers, appearing within sentences while also being connected to meaning. That means that we can use this model, but how can it describe two different modes? I'll show you that next. For optimal layering of linguistic units, I propose we consider an adaptation to phonological structure in Jackendorf's model that includes which mode the language uses. Visual or auditory, labeled articulatory perceptual interfaces. With that, you can understand phonological rules of either visual or auditory languages within this part of the model. That way people can study the language, and in fact, most people who study signed languages work on phonological structures. Not as many work on syntactic or conceptual structures. This is largely because phonological structure presents a unique challenge, and researchers are still trying to solve a number of questions around figuring out how this interface uses the parameters I mentioned earlier, keeping in mind that not all of them are essential. Learning what features are not distinctive will reveal what is essential. That's what it means to look at phonological structure, while studying principles for how the integration of phonological units may differ for auditory and visual modalities would fall within the interface component. Next, I'll focus on syntactic structure. This is where space can make an impact, but how does it fit within the whole model? I'll show you. Gestural space as medium should be considered because space is used to make meaning, syntactic structures, and phonological structures. Now, how you perceive the use of space means that it's also part of the perceptual interface. Visual languages use space as the primary medium, while spoken languages use space very little, if at all. Sign languages use space a great deal. The interface would include the eyes for input, while the output is motoric. Those bodily movements are also regulated by the left hemisphere, sending messages to the articulators for linguistic output on the hands, while the eyes are relied upon for input, with those messages being sent to the left hemisphere for analysis. So those are two components, but when considering deaf-blind communication, a new element might be added. In that case, building an optimal language may mean including a tactile component. While their use of gestural space may also be modified to maximize capacity, thus further restructuring the signing space.